Hey guys, Nicholas here from KORUA Shapes. Today I want to talk to you about how I prepare my board in general, but also for summer storage. I want to show you how to do it at home, so you don't need too many tools. Before you get started, maybe make sure you kind of put a blanket over things you don't want to ruin, because there is some wax involved and some fire and stuff, so be careful. Don't use your best clothes, obviously. Start off taking just a rag to clean the base, just of whatever's left over from like last spring shred. Just wipe it off a bit. While you're doing that, you can kind of check for scratches and stuff you have in the base where you want to kind of get rid of. So what you need for this is a lighter, a metal scraper, and a P-Tex candle. And there is a little trick to place the metal edge on the board near the scratch you want to fix, so you don't get it all over there. And also, if you hold it close enough, it'll get less smoke particles and stuff in the P-Tex, so it'll stick better. There is some fumes involved in this, so make sure you use a room with like good ventilation. Make sure it's not too cold outside, because you don't want the base to be super cold, or the difference in temperature will make like the wax not stick as well, or the P-Tex not stick as well either. The way you do it is you just light up the candle. It's pretty simple. Hold it close to the metal scraper until it kind of burns by itself. You can usually fill in a bit more than you think it'll need, because it kind of sinks in while you're doing it, while it's drying up. Watch out, this stuff is super hot, so you want to get it out of the way where you don't touch it. If you've waited a while, you can start scraping. Make sure your board is fixed all right. And I just go over it smoothly. I'd rather go over it more often than ripping the whole P-Tex out. I always scrape in like the direction of the board. So you wouldn't want to scrape this way, because you want the base to kind of be fast in the direction that you ride the most. So you don't want to put any scratches in there the wrong direction. All right. So it's nice and smooth now. What I do is I also take the brass brush and I just go over the rest of it. Clean it out. And check for any other scratches you might want to fix. I usually go for the deeper ones, because the smaller ones, they don't have such a big effect, and the P-Tex won't hold as well in there either. If it's really bad and you get like a core shot or whatever, you can also get it fixed by a professional. That works as well. So that's for like the bigger issues. I always start doing the edges from the base side, starting with finding the burrs. And you can either do it by hand, but be careful, because sometimes the edges are pretty sharp. Or you can take the cloth and just go along it, and you can kind of feel where it's dragging. That's where the burrs are. We want to take them out a bit, and you do that with a diamond file, because it's harder, a lot harder than the metal file. What happens is when you hit a rock, the metal, it hardens. That's when you see sparks flying. You notice if you're using this file, you'll just slip off trying to do the edges, and that's because the edge is harder than the file, so you'll basically ruin the file, make it dull. So with the diamond file, what you do is you take some water. That's also to prevent too much heating up happening. And you just go along the edges where the burr is, and you can kind of feel it. I hold the file like this, because if you hold it like this, you're much more likely to go over and tilt it too much to where you're kind of taking off the edge, and you don't want that to happen, because you want it to stay as sharp as possible while doing this. And you can actually hear when it's working. You can hear it crunch. And then working on the edges, it's important to always clean after you did some of the work, to just clean off all the scraps, because you're taking metal particles off of the edge, and if you work them in too much, they'll be in the base and make your base slower because metal isn't really fast. So you want to keep the base as clean as possible. After we've used the coarse diamond file, we use the metal file. And what I do is, because your edges are usually come from the factory kind of hanging, that makes the board turn more. So what I do is I just take a little bit of masking tape, go around the file to make sure that you have that little bit of angle to your edge, and also that the pointy tips of the file, they don't scratch your base while you're doing the edges. And with this, you can't clean your base too much. That's where the most metal comes off of the edges that you don't want in your base. Now we work on the side edges. So you tip the board up, and the first thing you want to check is your ABS sidewalls, because you want them to be lower than the edge a little bit, because otherwise, if you're trying to work on the edge, you'll actually be working on the ABS sidewalls, not the edge. So there is like special little tools you can buy that make it easier to scrape it off. But what I do is I take the file, like the pointy end of the file, and you see these little edges on the side. You can actually use those to get the sidewall off. So and you'll take a nice little string off of it. So you don't have to take too much off, just enough so you can be working on the edge. So after we took care of the ABS sidewalls, we'll start working on the edges. And same as with the base, we start with the diamond file first to get rid of the burrs and like the hardened spots. So I clamped this into my angle as well, 1 degree angle. That's the way it comes from the factory. And then just make the file wet again. I like to go over it a few times, because the more work you do with the diamond file, the less you'll have to do with the metal. Then we start with the metal file. So the metal file is sometimes a bit tricky to place on the angle. So you want it to be like slightly crooked. That makes the metal kind of move away from the file and the edge where you're working. So I use this clamp to kind of fix it a bit better. And you can see how it's a bit sideways, and I get a good firm grip like this. You don't want to slip off doing this. It does need a little bit of force to get the metal going. If you have a good firm grip on it, you're pretty good. And if you're doing it right, you can really see the metal flying off of the edge. Don't forget to clean, because we don't want that metal in the base. After I've done the edges, all I do is I detune like the back and the front of the boards with the diamond file. Depending on your preference, you can go further in or further back. Other people like to detune the middle of the edge as well. I usually just check where the board starts, the nose scoop starts to rise, and go like 5 centimeters back. But I do it based on feeling more than science. All right, edges are sharp. You can actually test with your fingernail. After a full season of riding, you've been riding a lot of snow, especially in spring. The snow gets dirty, so the base has a lot of dirt and stuff in there that doesn't want to be in there, doesn't need to be in there, that makes it slow. What we do now is basically cleaning the base, and there's 2 ways to do that. You can either use like wax removal that's made specially for it. That's a spray on it, pretty toxic from what I know. Other way you can do it is just to wax it in and then scrape it off while the wax is still warm. We're gonna do it like that. That'll suck all the dirt out of it and you'll scrape it away. You'll see the scrapes will be pretty gross when you do that the first time. You can do that multiple times if you want. I usually do once. I use this warm wax because the warmer wax goes deeper into the base, into the pores that are in there. Usually the wax brands, they give you a recommended temperature that you should heat up your iron to. And in general, it shouldn't be smoking, otherwise it's too hot. If you're waxing it and you see the smoke coming up, you're doing it wrong. Set the wax iron to 90 degrees. So I would recommend using a proper waxing iron and not some random closing iron, because the temperature is more exact and it tells you if the iron is overheating. Like with this model, the light will go red and that means I have to stop waxing. And as soon as it goes green again, it's the right temperature and it's regulated. So in applying the wax, there's different techniques as well. You can like scrape it on to use less, or you can just drip it on. Make sure you get it everywhere. And here with waxing, I make sure I go in the direction that the board wants to run. So I wouldn't wax it from this side to that side, but just... And waxing it in, if you want to do it properly, for me, I think it takes some time, because you don't want the whole board to still be like shiny and wet, because that's a sign you're like waxing it too warm. So I want a slight streak behind it and then see it dry up right after. Make sure you don't let it stand like that for too long or you ruin the board, because you'll heat up all the glue and it won't stick anymore and it'll be done. So now that we've got the wax in everywhere and it's nice and warm, you can feel the board underneath. If it's got like you can feel the heat lightly. Okay, we're good. So normally you give the board, after you wax it, you give it a few hours and a bit of time to work itself in there. So you might scrape it off the next day. But now that we're cleaning the board, we want the pores to be open and pull the wax and all the dirt out straight away. So I take this plastic scraper. There is special scraping tools for it that make it nice and perfect, but with a bit of exercise you can sharpen it on the edge itself, now that it's nice and sharp. So the way I do this is just scrape it off. Make sure that you don't scrape it off like that or you ruin the edge, because you want kind of a nice edge on it to scrape later on. So the way it works best for me, scraping the board, because you're putting quite a bit of pressure on it, I make sure it sits like nicely on your board stand. So I wouldn't scrape this side because it'll tip. So I'd place the board that it can't tip. And I stand towards the nose of the board and hold the scraper like this, like with my thumbs, so I can push in with my thumbs and kind of give it a slight bend. That way I feel like I can get the wax off nicer and with less effort. And you don't want to press like crazy. You'd rather spend more time scraping. So after I've done one side, I'll turn the board around so it doesn't tip on me. And then you just continue on this side. And try not to scrape like this way or this way, so just in the running length of the board. And waxing and scraping the same, like you want to make sure you wax the whole board, the whole nose, and also the tail. Don't leave out parts, because in the end of the day, you're going to be using the nose as well. if the snow is softer. Make sure you get it all off. Like if you have some good light in your workshop or wherever you are, maybe shine the light and you can always still find spots that you missed and then go after it again. You'll notice if you're done that if you go over it, there won't be any wax coming off anymore. That's when you're good. But as long as there's wax coming off, you know you're not finished. All right, I think that was it. Now that we've scraped the board, we'll take the brass brush first and then just do the same thing. Just brush it down. And what this does is it gets the rest of the wax that's deeper in the pores out. And if you do it right, you'll see like little wax particles in front of the brush and the base becomes nice and shiny. Start to look fast. So after using the brass brush, we'll use the nylon brush, the white one, and do the same thing, like just get the very last wax particles out of there. Wax and dirt. So the main difference between cleaning the base with hot wax and actually waxing it is the time that the wax gets to soak into the base. So if you're just doing a regular waxing job for the next day of riding, you would leave the wax soaking in overnight for a few hours at least. And with cleaning it, you scrape it right off again while it's still warm. Now that we've cleaned the board and I want to store it for summer, I would wax it in again with warm wax, put a nice thick layer on there, clean the edges off a little bit, and then I would keep it like that until next autumn when I scrape the board off again and use the brushes and everything. But for summer, I just place it in a dark, dry room. Yeah, and that's pretty much all there is to it. Thanks for watching, guys, and enjoy your turns.